What if everything you believe about yourself, your choices, even the very shape of your destiny, was already written long before you were born? Not in the genetic code passed down by your parents, nor in the ink of official records, but in something older, stranger, and far more elusive, a hidden blueprint that quietly scripts the rhythms of human life and civilization itself. Throughout the ages, whispers have surfaced about such a book. In some traditions, it is called the Akashic Records, an eternal library of human thought, action, and intention, where every possibility already resides. In others, it appears as the Book of Life, where names are inscribed before time itself begins, and destinies are sealed by divine decree. To skeptics, these stories are mere superstition, poetic metaphors to give order to the chaos of existence. Yet beneath the surface of myth, one unsettling idea repeats, the notion of a forbidden manuscript, not of parchment and ink, but of hidden knowledge that carries immense power, not by predicting the future, but by shaping how people come to believe in it. Imagine a book not made to be read by the masses, but one that exists as a fragmented system of influence, scattered across religions, philosophies, and sciences. Pieces of it encoded in sacred texts, others buried in ancient rituals, and still more hidden in psychological insights discovered long before modern psychology had a name. To the rulers and thinkers who glimpsed even fragments of it, the book became a weapon, a guide, a dangerous blueprint for directing the minds of others. This is not a book you would ever find on a shelf. Its pages do not turn, its words do not speak. Instead, it exists in patterns and myths that enthrall societies, in laws that shape behavior, in rituals that bind communities. Those who mastered its principles became kings, prophets, priests, and eventually politicians and technologists. Those who did not remained subjects, participants in a narrative they did not author but unconsciously obeyed. The haunting possibility is that you, too, are part of such a script. The choices you make, the opinions you hold, even the emotions that swell inside you when confronted with an image or a phrase, all of these may not be entirely your own. They may be echoes of a narrative written long ago, rehearsed across generations, repeated so subtly that you mistake it for your own inner voice. Every culture has its myth of forbidden knowledge. In the biblical story, Adam and Eve are cast out of paradise, not for murder or betrayal, but for eating from the tree of knowledge. In Greek myth, Prometheus is chained and tortured for bringing fire, the symbol of power and awareness, to humanity. In each case, the warning is clear. Some truths are too dangerous, too destabilizing, to be given freely. Control over knowledge is control over destiny. And so, the forbidden book, whether real or metaphorical, has always remained hidden in some form, not lost, but protected, scattered, or disguised. Perhaps the most disquieting thought is that the book is not forbidden because it cannot be found, but because it is everywhere, in plain sight, written into the myths that children are told before they can question, etched into the rituals of nations that parade their power in symbols and ceremonies, encrypted in the digital architecture of the platforms that mediate our attention every waking moment. You were born into a world already scripted, stepping onto a stage long prepared, with roles, expectations, and boundaries quietly set for you. The whispers of the forbidden book are not distant legends. They are the invisible scaffolding of your everyday reality, and the question is not whether the book exists, but whether you have the courage to see it, to recognize the story you have been given, and to ask whether it is truly yours. Long before skyscrapers and satellites, long before electricity hummed through the veins of our cities, power was not measured in machines, but in myths. The first great rulers of human civilization understood something most of us overlook even today. The body can be chained, but the mind once bound will chain itself. In the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, where some of humanity's earliest cities rose, priest kings claimed divine mandate over their people. Their authority did not rest solely on weapons or walls, but on stories. When the great rivers flooded or famine struck, the answers were not sought in soil or weather, but in the will of the gods. And who spoke for the gods? The rulers, the priests, the scribes, who claimed access to the hidden order of the universe. To doubt them was not only rebellion against power, it was rebellion against the cosmos itself. Here lies the first fragment of the forbidden book. The recognition that human beings obey stories more deeply than they obey laws. A decree can be broken, a soldier can be resisted, but a myth, woven into the fabric of daily life, becomes indistinguishable from reality. It shapes not only behavior, but thought, not only action, but identity. Consider Egypt, where for millennia, the pharaohs were not merely kings, but gods incarnate. Entire populations labored under the desert sun to build monuments that would outlast empires, not through brute force alone, but through conviction. To move a stone for the pyramid was to participate in the eternal order of the universe, to ensure the rising of the sun, the flooding of the Nile, the very continuation of life itself. What modern ruler could command such loyalty? Only one who had convinced the people that their labor was not for him, but for the cosmos. Ritual amplified this effect. The daily ceremonies in temples, the chants, the sacrifices, all were not mere gestures, but psychological conditioning. They trained individuals to associate obedience with sacredness, conformity with survival. Ritual was the technology of the ancient world, programming the human mind in ways that were invisible, yet irresistible. The blueprint began here, in the understanding that fear of divine punishment and hope for divine reward could bind millions more effectively than armies. Where force falters, belief endures. And so religion became governance, myth became law, and ritual became surveillance. The gods could see everything, even what the king's soldiers could not. But this was not deception alone. Even the rulers themselves were entangled in the stories they propagated. Pharaohs believed they were gods, kings sought omens before battle, and priests trembled before the very deities they invoked. The Forbidden Book is not merely a manual of manipulation, it is a mirror. Those who wield it are often bound by it, as well, trapped in the same web of belief they use to govern others. Yet, notice how each civilization found the same principle. In Mesopotamia, order was enforced through the written law codes, said to descend from the gods, carving divine authority into stone. In India, caste and dharma wove a social fabric that defined every person's role before they even drew their first breath. In Mesoamerica, blood sacrifice kept cosmic cycles turning, each cut of the blade reinforcing the narrative that, without obedience, the universe itself would collapse. Everywhere, the pattern was the same: knowledge withheld, symbols exalted, ritual repeated. And everywhere, the result was obedience on a scale that no mere military could achieve. People did not simply follow rulers. They carried the rulers within themselves, in their fears, their hopes, their very sense of what was real. This is why the Forbidden Book is not a single text, but a dispersed archive. It exists wherever stories dictate reality. Its pages are myths, its ink is ritual, its language is belief. And each empire added to its script, refining the art of governing not bodies but minds. When we look back, it is tempting to see these ancient systems as primitive, the relics of a superstitious past. But are they truly so distant? Do we not still build monuments, though now they are skyscrapers and digital platforms? Do we not still obey rituals, though now they appear as national anthems, daily scrolls through curated feeds, or consumer routines that feel as natural as breath? The blueprint was never abandoned. It merely evolved. The birth of civilization was also the birth of psychological governance. Power was no longer just the spear or the chain, but the narrative whispered into the collective mind. Ancient rulers understood that to control the imagination of the people was to control the people themselves. And so the forbidden book began its first chapters, not locked away in temples, but inscribed into the hearts and minds of entire civilizations. The haunting truth is that we, even now, may still be reading from those same invisible pages. Human beings live and die by stories. Strip away the layers of technology, economics, and politics, and beneath it all lies something far more fragile and yet far more enduring. The tale we tell ourselves about who we are, why we are here, and where we are going. Unlike other animals, we do not survive merely by instinct. We survive through meaning, and meaning is not found in raw facts. It is shaped through narrative. A collection of disconnected events means nothing until they are woven into a thread. That thread becomes a story, and the story becomes reality. Consider the Homeric epics of ancient Greece. For centuries, generations who never met Homer still believed they knew Achilles, Odysseus, and Hector. These characters were more than entertainment. They were moral exemplars, lessons encoded into narrative form. Through the Iliad and the Odyssey, entire populations learned what it meant to be courageous, cunning, loyal, or fatally proud. The stories set the framework within which people interpreted their own lives. The ordinary soldier did not simply march into battle. He imagined himself walking alongside heroes, his actions echoing through eternity. This is the great secret of narrative. It is not bound by truth or falsity in the scientific sense. A story need not be factually accurate to be psychologically real. Once embedded in the mind, it guides perception, organizes memory, and dictates behavior. We often imagine that rational analysis governs human action, yet countless experiments in psychology reveal otherwise. Cognitive scientists have shown that our brains are wired to seek coherence over accuracy. If a narrative provides a sense of order, our minds will cling to it, even if it contradicts evidence. This craving for coherence is what makes stories so dangerous and so powerful. In moments of uncertainty, when chaos threatens to overwhelm, a story becomes an anchor. It promises that events are not random, that suffering is not meaningless, that our lives are part of a larger arc. And when leaders, priests, or ideologues provide that arc, they do not simply persuade, they create a world for others to inhabit. Religious texts exemplify this. The Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, whatever one's belief about their origins, their power is undeniable. They do not merely describe divine events. They create frameworks through which billions interpret life, death, morality, and destiny. These texts are not books in the ordinary sense. They are maps of perception. To read them is not only to learn stories, but to be inducted into a worldview, where those stories define the boundaries of what is real. Political manifestos function in much the same way. The Communist Manifesto, for example, was not merely a pamphlet on economics. It was a narrative that transformed class struggle into an epic battle between oppressors and oppressed, destined to culminate in liberation. Millions adopted this lens, seeing history not as a random series of events, but as a scripted drama moving toward revolution. Similarly, nationalist histories retold the past not as a record of accidents, but as the inevitable rise of a chosen people. Once enough individuals believed, the narrative was no longer confined to paper. It became flesh in the form of revolutions, wars, and new empires. Why does this work? Because to the human mind, reality is never raw. We do not encounter the world as pure sensation. Our brains filter, edit, and connect information to form a coherent picture. Stories are the templates that make sense of the chaos. They tell us who is friend, who is enemy, what to fear, and what to strive toward. Without story, life collapses into noise. With story, even suffering can be redeemed because it becomes part of a larger meaning. The forbidden book, then, is not simply a record of manipulation. It is a recognition of this psychological truth. Whoever controls the story controls perception, and whoever controls perception controls reality itself. This does not require violence or coercion. It requires mastery of narrative. Think of modern advertising. No one buys a product because of its bare technical description. They buy because the product has been woven into a story of who they want to be. A watch is not a timekeeping device. It is a symbol of sophistication. A car is not a vehicle, it is freedom, power, status. The story is the true product, the object merely its vessel. Or think of politics today. Candidates rarely win by presenting lists of policies. They win by offering a story of decline and renewal, of betrayal and redemption, of hope against despair. Each speech is not simply information, it is myth-making. Voters do not choose the most rational option. They choose the narrative that resonates with their identity. And here lies the danger. For just as stories can inspire greatness, they can also justify atrocity. The myth of racial superiority fueled genocides. The story of divine conquest justified centuries of war. Each time, individuals believed they were acting rationally, but in truth, they were enacting a script written by someone else, authored by the invisible hand of narrative. The blueprint of control thrives here, in the hidden architecture of stories. Ancient rulers understood it. Modern corporations exploit it. Political machines weaponize it. And most of us, unaware, live within it. We are born into stories that were told before we could speak, and we carry them so deeply that questioning them feels like questioning reality itself. But what if the story is wrong? What if the narrative we inhabit is not truth but design, crafted to guide our perception toward ends we did not choose? That is the question the Forbidden Book poses. Not what is real, but who has the power to define what reality feels like. Human beings live and die by stories. Strip away the layers of technology, economics, and politics, and beneath it all lies something far more fragile and yet far more enduring. The tale we tell ourselves about who we are, why we are here, and where we are going. Unlike other animals, we do not survive merely by instinct. We survive through meaning, and meaning is not found in raw facts, it is shaped through narrative. A collection of disconnected events means nothing until they are woven into a thread. That thread becomes a story, and the story becomes reality. Consider the Homeric epics of ancient Greece. For centuries, generations who never met Homer still believed they knew Achilles, Odysseus, and Hector. These characters were more than entertainment. They were moral exemplars, lessons encoded into narrative form. Through the Iliad and the Odyssey, entire populations learned what it meant to be courageous, cunning, loyal, or fatally proud. The stories set the framework within which people interpreted their own lives. The ordinary soldier did not simply march into battle, he imagined himself walking alongside heroes, his actions echoing through eternity. This is the great secret of narrative. It is not bound by truth or falsity in the scientific sense. A story need not be factually accurate to be psychologically real. Once embedded in the mind, it guides perception, organizes memory, and dictates behavior. We often imagine that rational analysis governs human action, yet countless experiments in psychology reveal otherwise. Cognitive scientists have shown that our brains are wired to seek coherence over accuracy. If a narrative provides a sense of order, our minds will cling to it, even if it contradicts evidence. This craving for coherence is what makes stories so dangerous and so powerful. In moments of uncertainty, when chaos threatens to overwhelm, a story becomes an anchor. It promises that events are not random, that suffering is not meaningless, that our lives are part of a larger arc. And when leaders, priests, or ideologues provide that arc, they do not simply persuade, they create a world for others to inhabit. Religious texts exemplify this. The Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, whatever one's belief about their origins, their power is undeniable. They do not merely describe divine events. They create frameworks through which billions interpret life, death, morality, and destiny. These texts are not books in the ordinary sense. They are maps of perception. To read them is not only to learn stories, but to be inducted into a worldview, where those stories define the boundaries of what is real. Political manifestos function in much the same way. The Communist Manifesto, for example, was not merely a pamphlet on economics. It was a narrative that transformed class struggle into an epic battle between oppressors and oppressed, destined to culminate in liberation. Millions adopted this lens, seeing history not as a random series of events, but as a scripted drama moving toward revolution. Similarly, nationalist histories retold the past not as a record of accidents, but as the inevitable rise of a chosen people. Once enough individuals believed, the narrative was no longer confined to paper. It became flesh in the form of revolutions, wars, and new empires. Why does this work? Because to the human mind, reality is never raw. We do not encounter the world as pure sensation. Our brains filter, edit, and connect information to form a coherent picture. Stories are the templates that make sense of the chaos. They tell us who is friend, who is enemy, what to fear, and what to strive toward. Without story, life collapses into noise. With story, even suffering can be redeemed, because it becomes part of a larger meaning. Asterisk, the forbidden book, then, is not simply a record of manipulation. It is a recognition of this psychological truth. Whoever controls the story, controls perception, and whoever controls perception, controls reality itself. This does not require violence or coercion. It requires mastery of narrative. Think of modern advertising. No one buys a product because of its bare technical description. They buy because the product has been woven into a story of who they want to be. A watch is not a timekeeping device. It is a symbol of sophistication. A car is not a vehicle, it is freedom, power, status. The story is the true product, the object merely its vessel. Or think of politics today. Candidates rarely win by presenting lists of policies. They win by offering a story of decline and renewal, of betrayal and redemption, of hope against despair. Each speech is not simply information, it is myth-making. Voters do not choose the most rational option. They choose the narrative that resonates with their identity. And here lies the danger. For just as stories can inspire greatness, they can also justify atrocity. The myth of racial superiority fueled genocides. The story of divine conquest justified centuries of war. Each time, individuals believed they were acting rationally, but in truth, they were enacting a script written by someone else, authored by the invisible hand of narrative. The blueprint of control thrives here, in the hidden architecture of stories. Ancient rulers understood it. Modern corporations exploit it. Political machines weaponize it. And most of us, unaware, live within it. We are born into stories that were told before we could speak, and we carry them so deeply that questioning them feels like questioning reality itself. But what if the story is wrong? What if the narrative we inhabit is not truth, but design, crafted to guide our perception toward ends we did not choose? That is the question the forbidden book poses. Not what is real, but who has the power to define what reality feels like. The blueprint of control is not speculation. It has been tested, refined, and executed across civilizations. Each age leaves behind case studies in how reality itself can be bent not by altering physical laws, but by reshaping the stories through which people perceive the world. These stories function like lenses. Put them on and everything you see conforms to their design. Across history, different rulers, empires, and institutions have wielded this lens with terrifying mastery. Some used it to unify and expand, others to dominate, manipulate, or destroy. But the principle remains constant. Attention is harvested, belief is engineered, and energy is redirected toward ends most people never consciously chose. Let us walk through a few of the most striking examples, moments where the forbidden book, or at least fragments of it, seem to have been opened and read aloud. Rome and Christianity, the transformation of an empire in the first centuries of the Common Era. Christianity was a small, persecuted sect. Its followers were dismissed by the Roman elite as fringe fanatics, harmless at best, dangerous at worst. Yet within a few generations, this marginal movement would become the official operating system of the Roman Empire. How did it happen? The story of Christianity was not just about the life of Jesus. It was about the reframing of suffering, fear, and loyalty into a narrative of salvation. Rome had always bound its citizens together with rituals of loyalty to the emperor and to the gods. Christianity inverted this. Instead of loyalty to earthly rulers, it promised eternal allegiance to a higher kingdom. Instead of fearing death, it glorified martyrdom as a gateway to everlasting life. This narrative carried a dangerous power. In a society obsessed with power and punishment, here was a movement that made even death itself lose its sting. To the authorities, persecution was supposed to stamp out heresy. Instead, it amplified the story, turning martyrs into living proof of the faith's truth. The more the empire tried to crush it, the stronger the narrative became. Eventually, Rome did not destroy Christianity. It was Christianity that absorbed Rome. Constantine's conversion was not simply a personal belief shift. It was a recognition that this story had become too powerful to ignore. By adopting it, Rome gave itself a new engine of legitimacy. From then on, religion became the empire's glue. Loyalty to the emperor was now intertwined with loyalty to the church. The story of salvation became the story of Rome itself, and the blueprint had revealed its secret. Control is most enduring not when imposed by force, but when it is woven into the very fabric of meaning. World War II and Goebbels' propaganda jump forward over 1,000 years, and we find the blueprint resurfacing in the darkest chapter of the 20th century. Germany in the 1930s was not conquered by weapons. First, it was conquered by narrative, and at the center of this was Joseph Goebbels, Minister of Propaganda under Adolf Hitler. Goebbels understood what many still fail to grasp. Repetition and emotion can transform lies into national truth. His methods were not complex. They were brutally simple. Tell a lie, repeat it often enough, and wrap it in the emotional power of fear, pride, and resentment. Eventually, it ceases to feel like propaganda, it becomes reality. The Nazis framed Germany not as a nation defeated after World War I, but as a betrayed victim, stabbed in the back by enemies within. They crafted a story of humiliation, struggle, and redemption, positioning Hitler not merely as a politician, but as the chosen redeemer of the German people. Posters, radio broadcasts, films, speeches, every medium was weaponized to reinforce the same myth. It was not about persuasion in the rational sense. It was about immersion. Germans awoke each day, surrounded by a narrative that redefined their nation, their enemies, and their destiny. The terrifying result was not just mass compliance, but mass enthusiasm. Ordinary people, convinced they were participants in a heroic, national epic, committed or tolerated atrocities that in another context would have seemed unthinkable. This is how the blueprint operates. It bypasses reason and colonizes imagination. Goebbels himself once remarked, "We do not talk to say something, but to obtain a certain effect." The blueprint of control is not concerned with facts. It is concerned with effects, with shaping perception so thoroughly that individuals enact a script they did not write. The Cold War, perception as a battlefield when the Second World War ended. The blueprint did not disappear, it evolved. The Cold War was not fought only with nuclear arsenals and espionage. It was fought with perception itself. For the first time in history, psychological operations psyops were treated as weapons of war. Both the United States and the Soviet Union recognized that the true battleground was the human mind. fear became the weapon of choice. Propaganda films, news bulletins, school drills all reinforced the same story, that the other side was not merely an adversary, but an existential threat. In the Soviet Union, the narrative painted capitalism as a monstrous system of exploitation, poised to devour the working class. In America, communism was depicted as a creeping disease, a shadow infiltrating neighborhoods, schools, even families. Citizens did not merely disagree with each other's systems, they perceived themselves as locked in an apocalyptic struggle for the fate of humanity. The genius of Cold War psyops was their ability to manipulate the invisible. Rumors, disinformation campaigns, staged defections, all were designed not to kill, but to seed doubt, paranoia, and fear. When perception itself becomes a battlefield, victory does not require bombs. It requires shaping what people believe to be possible or inevitable. The forbidden book's pages turn again. Control is most efficient when it makes people police themselves. Citizens monitored neighbors, questioned colleagues, even suspected family members. Fear did the work of armies, and all of it was powered by stories crafted myths of threat and salvation. Social media, algorithms, reality in the digital age today. The blueprint has taken on a new form, more subtle and more pervasive than ever before. It no longer requires emperors, ministers of propaganda, or Cold War psyops. Now, it resides in algorithms. Billions of people wake each morning and check glowing screens. What they see is not random. It is curated, sorted, and filtered by invisible systems designed not to inform, but to capture attention. Every like, every scroll, every pause is a data point. From this data, algorithms learn what keeps you hooked, and then they feed you more of it. At first glance, this seems harmless mere personalization, but beneath it lies the most advanced form of narrative control in history. Unlike the propaganda of the past, which broadcast the same message to millions, algorithms craft individualized realities. Two people living in the same city can inhabit entirely different worlds, exposed only to stories that confirm their biases and intensify their emotions. The result is not unity, but fragmentation. Entire populations are divided into echo chambers, each convinced their version of reality is the truth, each blind to the fact that what they see has been engineered. The forbidden book has never been more alive. Ancient priests used ritual, Goebbels used radio, Cold War strategists used fear. Today, social media companies use machine learning, but the principle remains unchanged. Attention is harvested, belief is engineered, and energy is redirected. What makes this moment different is scale. Never before have billions of minds been so meticulously monitored and nudged in real time. The blueprint has become automated, self-learning, and omnipresent. We no longer need a dictator at the podium. We carry the mechanism of control in our pockets, checking it dozens, even hundreds of times a day. And what is most chilling is that many of us defend it. Addicted to the stories it provides, even as it bends our perception of reality itself. From Rome to Nazi Germany, from the Cold War to the age of algorithms, the pattern is unmistakable. Each case reveals the same hidden architecture. Control is not about chains or prisons. It is about narratives. Stories that define what we fear, what we desire, and what we believe possible. Stories that make us act in ways we would never imagine if we saw the strings being pulled. The forbidden book is not metaphorical poetry. It is historical reality, and its pages are still being written today. The blueprint works not because rulers are clever, but because the human mind is vulnerable in predictable ways. Power is not imposed solely from outside, it is invited from within. To understand why civilizations across history bend so readily to control, we must look inward, into the architecture of our own psychology. The most haunting truth is this: people do not surrender autonomy because they are weak, ignorant, or evil. They surrender because they are human, And the very mechanisms that make us cooperative, social beings also make us pliable under pressure, obedience to authority. In the early 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram designed an experiment that remains infamous to this day. Participants were told they were helping with a study on learning. They were instructed to administer electric shocks to another person whenever that person gave a wrong answer. The shocks weren't real, but the participants didn't know that. They believed they were inflicting genuine pain. The machine's dials climbed from mild jolts to dangerous levels marked 30. The person in the other room screamed, begged, even fell silent, and yet, under the firm instructions of a man in a lab coat, most participants continued pressing the switches. 65% went all the way to the maximum voltage, delivering what they thought were fatal shocks. What does this reveal? People obey authority even when it violates their conscience. The pressure to comply, to trust the structure of hierarchy, outweighs individual morality. The blueprint has always known this. Pharaohs, emperors, generals, executives all wear their own versions of the lab coat. Symbols of authority short-circuit resistance. Obedience is not an anomaly. It is the default, the power of conformity, but authority is not the only lever. Equally powerful is the pull of conformity, the silent gravity of the group. Solomon Asch's famous experiments in the 1950s demonstrated this. With unsettling clarity, participants were shown a card with a line on it, followed by another card with 3 lines of different lengths. Their task was simple: identify which line matched the first. The answer was obvious, but Asch added a twist. Each participant was placed in a group with confederates who deliberately gave the wrong answer. One by one, the group confidently declared an answer that was clearly false. When it came time for the real participant to respond, something astonishing happened. Faced with unanimous wrong answers, many participants went along with the group, even when their own eyes told them otherwise. 3 out of 4 conformed at least once. Some admitted later that they knew the group was wrong, yet they still complied, unwilling to break the harmony. This is the hidden machinery of control. People fear isolation more than error. Belonging matters more than truth. Societies are not ruled by force alone, but by the fear of standing apart. The forbidden book does not have to break your will, it only has to make you feel alone. Fear, conditioning, and the hunger for certainty, authority, and conformity are the sticks. Fear and certainty are the carrots. Human beings are not built to dwell in uncertainty. The unknown breeds anxiety, and the brain craves closure, even false closure over endless ambiguity. Psychologists studying fear conditioning have shown how easily the mind can be trained. If a neutral signal, a sound, a color, a phrase is paired with a painful or frightening experience, soon the signal alone is enough to trigger fear. Once this association is built, it is stubbornly resistant to extinction. Rulers and propagandists have always exploited this mechanism. A word, a symbol, a headline becomes enough to conjure dread. During the Cold War, the word communist could instantly generate suspicion and panic. Today, certain labels, terrorist, traitor, extremist, the same conditioned weight. No evidence is required. The fear is automatic, but fear alone would paralyze. To be useful, it must be paired with certainty, the promise that there is an answer, a savior, a solution. Fear creates the wound, certainty sells the cure. This is why people cling to ideologies, leaders, and systems that promise order. The chaos of the unknown is intolerable. The comfort of certainty, if illusory, is irresistible. Why resistance fails? What makes this blueprint so devastating is that it does not rely on extraordinary circumstances. It relies on ordinary psychology. The pressure to obey, the desire to conform, the craving for certainty, these are not weaknesses of a few. They are the wiring of us all. Even awareness does not guarantee immunity. Knowing the Milgram experiment does not prevent obedience. Knowing the ash study does not free one from conformity. Just as a magician's trick still dazzles, even when explained, the mechanisms of control continue to operate, even when exposed. This is the haunting insight. The forbidden book is not outside us, it is inside us. Its strategies succeed because they align with the deepest structures of human behavior. Control is not imposed on unwilling mind. It is welcomed by minds predisposed to seek safety, order, and belonging. The mirror turned toward us at this point. The question turns uncomfortably inward. We can analyze Rome, Nazi Germany, the Cold War, or social media algorithms with the safe distance of history. But what about us? What about the present moment, this very life we are living? Have we not obeyed authorities we doubted, simply because they wore the symbols of legitimacy? Have we not remained silent in rooms where we disagreed, because everyone else nodded along? Have we not sought certainty in stories, movements, or leaders even, when cracks in the narrative were visible? The forbidden book does not ask us to look at others. It asks us to look at ourselves, and to admit that submission is not imposed, is chosen, over and over again, through the small concessions of daily life. This is why the blueprint is so enduring. It does not need constant enforcement. It only needs human nature. And as long as people are wired for obedience, conformity, fear, and certainty, the strategies of control will never truly disappear. The forbidden book is not a relic of ancient civilizations, nor a tool of distant tyrants. It is a living text, written in the circuitry of the human mind. And as long as we remain human, its pages remain open, waiting to be read. The forbidden book was once imagined as a secret manuscript, locked in temple vaults or whispered among shadowy orders. But in the modern age, it no longer belongs to kings, priests, or hidden societies. It is no longer rare, no longer guarded. Instead, it has become something far more insidious. It is everywhere. The book has been scattered into fragments, dispersed across disciplines that claim to be ordinary and harmless. Its pages lie in psychology journals, marketing manuals, user experience design guides, and military handbooks. They are written in the language of science, commerce, and technology, not of myth or scripture. The power is the same, but the disguise is complete. From sacred scripts to scientific papers, in ancient times, a priest might inscribe a law on stone, declaring it divine. Today, a cognitive scientist publishes a paper on attention and memory, showing how humans are drawn to threat and novelty. The difference is only in appearance. Where once the language was ritual, now it is data. Where once the authority was the gods, now it is peer-reviewed science. But the effect is identical, a codified knowledge of how minds bend, how attention can be captured, how decisions can be steered. The blueprint is alive in every chart, every study, every equation that maps human behavior into predictable patterns. The marketers, as new priests, consider marketing the modern temple of persuasion. Entire industries exist to refine the art of nudging, priming, and framing. Books on advertising openly describe the mechanisms of influence, scarcity, authority, social proof without ever acknowledging that they echo techniques thousands of years old. To sell a product is to shape desire. To craft a brand is to rewrite identity. The logos that saturate city skylines are no different from the banners of empires or the sigils of ancient cults. They bypass reason and go straight to the emotional core, embedding themselves in the unconscious. We like to believe that buying a product is a choice, but the choice has already been designed, orchestrated long before the moment of purchase. The forbidden book whispers not in temples but in billboards, commercials, and pop-ups. Its pages are hidden in plain sight, masquerading as consumer culture. The engineers of behavior. Then there are the architects of the digital world, designers, engineers, and data scientists. Their work appears innocent, even creative. But when examined closely, one realizes they too are turning the pages of the book. Every notification icon, every infinite scroll, every push alert is a lever of attention. The little red dot glowing on a phone screen is not accidental. It is the modern equivalent of a ritual bell designed to trigger a response. Asterisk apps do not evolve by chance. They are laboratories of behavioral control, constantly tested, refined, and perfected. Entire teams run experiments on millions of people at once, tracking how small changes in color, wording, or timing affect human behavior. This is no different from conditioning in a psychology lab, except the lab is global and the subjects are everyone with a device. The book once guided kings in shaping empires. Now it guides engineers in shaping human time. The most precious resource is no longer land, gold, or oil, it is attention, and the forbidden book provides the operating manual for its capture. The military, the armed forces have their own annotated copy. Documents on psychological operations, perception management, and information warfare all echo the same principles. Victory is not won on the battlefield alone, but in the minds of populations. In the Cold War, leaflets, broadcasts, and rumors became weapons. Today, disinformation campaigns, bot armies, and deepfakes carry out the same function, with infinitely greater reach. Nations no longer need to invade each other's lands. If they can colonize each other's perception, the forbidden book has been weaponized. It is studied not for enlightenment, but for advantage. Those who master its principles can destabilize societies, fragment trust, and redirect belief fall without firing a single shot. A book we swim in. Here lies the great irony. For centuries, the book was forbidden because it was hidden. Today it is forbidden because it is everywhere. Its omnipresence makes it invisible. Most people unknowingly read from it every day. Not in sacred texts, but in the apps they scroll, the feeds they consume, the news cycles they follow. They do not encounter the book as an object, they breathe it as an atmosphere. When an algorithm decides which post you see, which headline rises, which ad follows you across the web, it is reading from the book. It is applying lessons about attention, desire, and fear that stretch back to the earliest rulers. The interface looks harmless. The screen looks like a tool. But beneath the surface, the blueprint is at work, guiding thought, sculpting perception, nudging action. The normalization of control, and perhaps the most terrifying element of all, is the normality of it. No one is coerced to read. No one is forced to obey. People open the book themselves, willingly, eagerly. They refresh feeds, click headlines, share stories, participating in their own conditioning without realizing it. This is why the forbidden book endures. It is not locked away. It is not encrypted. It is hidden in plain sight. Its pages scattered across the mundane rituals of modern life. Because it is everywhere, it is nowhere. Because it is ordinary, it is unnoticed. We imagine the forbidden as rare as hidden knowledge possessed by a few. But the real danger is knowledge so ubiquitous that it vanishes into the background. What once required access to a priestly caste now requires nothing more than a smartphone. Drowning in the text, the haunting truth of our era is that we are not locked out of the book, we are drowning in it. We are saturated by its pages to the point of blindness. What once was mystery has become banality. The blueprint no longer feels like control because it feels like life itself. But this is the final brilliance of the book. When control is total, it does not feel like control. When influence is constant, it feels like freedom. And so, the forbidden book is not forbidden because we cannot find it. It is forbidden because we cannot see it. It is forbidden because to recognize it would mean questioning the very fabric of modern life, the feeds, the brands, the leaders, the systems we take for granted. The book has always been with us. But in this age, it has completed its transformation. No longer a relic of temples, no longer the secret of tyrants. no longer the weapon of propaganda alone. It is now the air we breathe, the language we speak, the screens we touch. The forbidden book has won, not by hiding from us, but by becoming us, for thousands of years. The blueprint has shaped civilizations, governed empires, and manipulated the minds of individuals. Its principles are embedded in religion, politics, propaganda, and technology. To study its history can feel overwhelming, even suffocating, like recognizing that one has lived in a vast machine without knowing it. The natural question follows: is resistance even possible? The answer is both sobering and liberating. The blueprint cannot be destroyed. It cannot be burned, erased, or undone, because it is woven into the very psychology of human beings. The levers of authority, conformity, and fear exist within us. They are not foreign invaders. They are part of our wiring. But what can be changed is our relationship to them. The mind may not be free from influence, but it can be free in awareness of influence. And awareness itself is liberation. Awareness as the first step. Every manipulation succeeds by hiding itself. Propaganda works best when it is mistaken for truth. Fear works best when it disguises itself as necessity. Authority works best when it passes for wisdom. To recognize the mechanism is to weaken its hold. When one sees the lever being pulled, the magic evaporates. A frightening headline, once recognized as engineered to capture attention, loses its hypnotic grip. A viral video, once seen as manufactured outrage, no longer dictates emotion. Awareness cuts the strings by revealing the strings. This is not immunity. No one is immune, but it is sovereignty. To know when one's fear is being triggered, when one's tribal instincts are being exploited, when one's attention is being harvested. This knowledge transforms passive subjects into conscious participants. The practices of resistance. How, then, can awareness be cultivated? Philosophers across history have offered tools, each pointing toward the same principle: mastery of the self before mastery of the world. The Stoics practiced detachment. They recognized that external forces, fame, power, fortune, were fleeting illusions. By focusing only on what lies within their control, they neutralized manipulation. If an emperor could not control their inner judgment, then no emperor truly ruled them. Mindfulness offers another path. By observing thoughts and emotions as passing clouds, rather than absolute truths, the individual reclaims distance from the blueprint's levers. Fear no longer dictates action when it is seen simply as a sensation arising and fading. Desire no longer commands when it is noticed with curiosity rather than submission. Media literacy is equally crucial in the modern age. To dissect a headline, to question a source, to recognize framing and bias, these are the shields of today's warrior. Literacy does not mean cynicism. It means discernment. It is the ability to hold information without being consumed by it. And finally, sovereignty over attention itself. To choose where one's focus rests, rather than handing it to every ping, buzz, or scroll. Attention is energy. To reclaim it is to reclaim life. Neutralizing the blueprint cannot be destroyed because it is simply a description of how humans work. But like any force of nature, it can be understood, redirected, and transcended. Consider fire. It can consume and destroy, but it can also warm and illuminate. The blueprint is the same. Recognizing the mechanics of obedience, conformity, and fear allows them to be used consciously. A community can rally around shared stories not to oppress, but to empower. A leader can wield authority not to dominate, but to inspire. Influence is not inherently evil. It becomes destructive only when it is unconscious, when it is hidden, when it is denied. The forbidden book is not evil in itself. It is dangerous because it is invisible. When it is recognized, its danger dissolves. The very act of knowing the blueprint is to break its spell. The battle, within the haunting realization, is this: the battlefield is not outside. It is not in governments or corporations alone. It is inside every human mind. The pull to obey, to conform, to cling to certainty is not imposed, is intrinsic. Therefore, liberation is not about dismantling society. It is not about rejecting technology, burning books, or withdrawing from the world. It is about mastering the forces within oneself. The forbidden book reveals that manipulation is possible because of the architecture of the mind. But by turning inward, by observing that architecture with clarity, one steps outside the cycle. The key is not to escape the book, but to read it consciously, to see the blueprint at work within oneself and refuse to be ruled by it unconsciously. From despair to empowerment, it is easy to respond to these realizations with despair. If manipulation is everywhere, if propaganda is constant, if the blueprint cannot be destroyed, then what hope remains? But this despair itself is another trick of the book. It is the illusion of helplessness. In truth, the act of recognition is already a form of resistance. The ability to see manipulation means one is no longer fully consumed by it. Every moment of awareness is a fracture in the blueprint's hold. Freedom, then, is not absolute escape. Freedom is the ongoing practice of awareness. It is the daily discipline of noticing, questioning, and choosing. It is not glamorous, but it is real, and it is available to anyone. The initiation, those who reach this understanding undergo an initiation of sorts. They see what most never do, that their mind is both the battlefield and the key to freedom. They realize that the forbidden book is not only external, it is internal. It is written into their own psychology, and in recognizing this, they gain a new form of power. Not the power to control others, but the power to refuse control. Not the power to escape influence, but the power to engage with it consciously. The blueprint remains. The forces of authority, conformity, and fear will always exist, but they no longer reign unchallenged. The mind that knows the game is a mind that can no longer be fully captured. The forbidden book promised dominion over perception, over belief, over reality itself, but its final secret is paradoxical. The very knowledge of its existence is what breaks its spell. Awareness is liberation, and liberation is nothing mystical, nothing unreachable. It is the simple, radical act of seeing clearly again and again, moment by moment. The forbidden book cannot be destroyed, but it can be neutralized, not through violence, not through revolution, but through recognition. The mind is the battlefield, the mind is the book, and the mind, once aware, is free. The journey comes to an end, but the end is only an illusion. The forbidden book has never been a relic, bound in leather and hidden in some forgotten archive. It is not an object that one can find or burn, not a secret text locked away by priests or kings. It is, and always has been, the architecture of controlled, the blueprint inscribed in the human psyche and echoed across history. You now know what few ever stop to see. You have glimpsed the design, the levers of obedience, the pull of conformity, the shaping power of fear, and the subtle weight of authority. You have seen how nations, religions, corporations, and technologies, each drew from the same well, each reading from the same forbidden pages to bend reality itself. And now the question turns toward you. The forbidden book is not in someone else's hands. It is in yours. Every headline you believe, every image you share, every story you repeat without questioning each, is a page read aloud, each a spell recited. You are not outside of the book, you are inside it. That realization is both terrifying and liberating. For if you are inside the book, then you are also capable of rewriting it. The choice is simple, but never easy. Will you remain a character in someone else's story, your beliefs authored by unseen hands, your fears dictated by external whispers? Or will you claim authorship of your own? Energy follows attention. Attention shapes reality. Wherever your focus rests, there grows the world you inhabit. The blueprint thrives on unconscious attention, eyes caught by outrage, minds captured by fear, spirits seduced by certainty, but awareness interrupts the flow. Awareness is the refusal to give your energy away blindly. Every moment offers this decision: to scroll or to stop, to repeat or to question, to obey or to reflect, to live as the written or to live as the writer. Most will never ask, most will never see. Most will continue reading the script laid before them, believing it was their own voice all along. But you have seen the book for what it is. You cannot unsee it now. And with that vision comes responsibility, the responsibility of choice. The blueprint will remain. The levers will always exist. The temptation of submission will never vanish. But awareness gives you the possibility of sovereignty. A sovereignty not granted by governments or systems, but born from within. So the question lingers as the last page turns. Which story will you live? The one written for you, or the one you choose to write? The forbidden book is open. The pen is in your hand.